This episode was created with the support of Free FM, Hamilton, New Zealand's community access media organisation. Visit us at freefm.org.nz.
I think of all things, working at hospice has taught me the importance of loving with intention, loving unconditionally and loving excessively. I mean, that is what's important. Too often in life we focus on the material, and I even, reflecting on my own marriage, I think I could have loved my husband with more intention and unconditionally. So that's what you learn. Grief is a really hard lesson, but what it does teach you is to value your relationships, to pay attention to them, and to love with intention.
I'm Andrew Johnstone, and this is The Last Breath, a podcast about death and dying, a Free FM production made in association with Hospice Waikato. In this series, I'm talking to the bereaved, the dying, and the people who care for them. And as we explore the work of hospice, we are also exploring the process of death and lifting the veil from a subject that is seldom addressed in an open and forthright manner. In a profound interview, grief counsellor and family services team leader Charmaine Smith talks about grief, forgiveness, the recent loss of her husband Pete, and the importance of loving with intent. Impressed by the way hospice cared for his late sister Susan, Chris Kawa got involved as a volunteer and later became a full-time employee. Chris talks about his work as facilities and equipment team leader and the joy of caring for others.
My name is Charmaine Smith. I currently am the family services team leader. I'm a counsellor. My training was done in South Africa, in Durban, and I did my placement at Addington Hospital. I immigrated 17 years ago from Durban to Hamilton, and I've been at hospice for that length of time. Yes, palliative care is something that I'm very passionate about, and I think it comes from my placement in Durban. I was asked to do the placement at Addington Hospital at the HIV Centre, so most of the patients I saw there were in the major symptomatic phase, and the hospital sent me to the hospice in Mayville. And I said to my son, I would love to work at hospice. It just made such a huge impression on me, the time that I spent in Mayville. And then my boys immigrated to New Zealand, and my son said to me, Mum, do you know there's a vacancy at the hospice in Hamilton? So I applied and got the job. Very lucky. I feel truly blessed to work at hospice. For me, it's a passion. I feel it's a real privilege to be able to walk along clients at a time when they're very, very vulnerable. So my role includes supporting other members of the allied health team, which includes the social workers, occupational therapists, spiritual care, the kaya whena, and massage therapists. I also run a patient carer group on a Friday. The groups are really, really important. It gives the patients an opportunity to talk about their treatments, to talk about their diagnosis, to talk about family issues, and it's just a safe space for them to relax and unwind. And then I do the healing journey, which is a bereavement group, and that is over a period of 6 weeks. It's 2 hours once a week, and that gives an opportunity for bereaved to look at the grieving process, stress, anxiety, and ways of coping. And as I mentioned to you earlier, my husband died at the hospice. He was diagnosed in 2019 with bowel cancer. I thought I knew everything about grief and loss, but it's very, very difficult when it's so close to home. I mean, I've watched a lot of people die, but it was difficult. Very grateful for hospice. The nurses were very kind and generous. Pete spent in the inpatient unit for about a week, and then was sent up to a hospital, and then came home, and he died at home. Yes, so I feel very blessed to have had the support of the hospice. It was really, really important. But yes, you feel that you know, I've got an honours degree in psychology, and you think you know everything about the profession in which you're working, but the pain of grief can be overwhelming, and it was only after the death of Pete that I could really understand why some bereaved can feel quite unhinged after the death of a loved one. Just think of his last day, and his last breath is cemented in my mind. Both my sons were with me when Pete died, and it was tough for them too, you know. Although you're expecting it, you're never quite prepared for the end to come. I've grown as a person. I think it doesn't matter how long you work at hospice, you're constantly learning, because the people that you're meeting, you know, the experiences, their life experiences. I've never met a person who hasn't had deep and profound experiences in life. And you never know what to expect as a counsellor when you're visiting a client. I remember once I visited a client in Waihi, and I actually went to see the wife, and the husband was there, and he said, I said, would you like to sit in on the session? And he said, no, the counsellor's not for me. But he didn't leave the room, he just sat away from his wife. And so I started the session talking to his wife, and he just kept on staring at me. And I thought, oh my God, I hope I don't have a book on my nose. You know, I just felt that. And I said, look, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop the session. I just need to ask your husband. He's just looking at me, and it's just making me feel quite uncomfortable. So I said to him, you know, why are you looking at me so intensely? And he paused, and then he said, oh, you look like my mother. And I said, oh. So I said, oh, well, I hope you had a good relationship with your mother. And he said, actually, no, I didn't. And he burst out crying. So I picked up a chair and I put it in front of me, and I asked him to just sit in front of me. And I said, well, you know I'm not your mum, but if I was your mum, what would you say to me? He said, I would ask you, why did you give me up? And this was a gentleman who was in his 80s. His wife was really blown away because it was a second marriage. They'd been married like over 20 years. He'd never discussed it with her, and he'd never even told her that he had been farmed out, as he said. But yes, so you never know what to expect as a counsellor. You meet each person where they are at.
Did that help him to express that to you?
It opened the space for him and his wife to talk about it, which was really important. He said he'd never raised it before. One, he felt a huge sense of shame, and he also felt it was something that he needed to just get over and move on. yeah, I mean, he wasn't expecting or even wanting to be part of the counselling session, but I think by the time I left, they were both in a better space. Another client I visited, his wife had breast cancer. Went to see her. The husband had come in the room and he said hello, and I don't know whether it's they're nervous of counsellors or they just feel uncomfortable, but he left the room, and I started the session with her, and during the course of our discussions she talked to me about her husband being very withdrawn, and I said to her, well, you know, would you like to have a session while I'm here? Sometimes it's easier to talk to your family when you've got someone that you don't know that's sitting with you. She started to cry and she said, I just don't know whether he loves me. And I said, so why don't we ask him that question? If that's weighing heavily on you, I think that's an important question to ask. And so he came back into the room. He was very hesitant, but he did come, and he sat next to her. And I said, you know, I've just been talking to your wife, and she's feeling, you know, that you've, since her diagnosis, that you've become a little distant, and she feels a little overwhelmed. And then I encouraged her. I said, well, why, you know, with me here, I'm just wondering if you want to just tell your husband what you told me. She just said, you know, you never tell me you love me, and I just feel you don't love me because of the breast cancer, and I look awful. And she just started to cry. Oh, and it was incredible. He just kneeled down, he took her hand, and he said, of course I love you. He said, I can tell you what you were wearing the day I met you. And he actually met her on Fairfield Bridge, and he described exactly what she had on the day that they met. And she said, I can't believe you remembered what I was wearing. And he said, of course. He said, that was the best day of my life, that I met you. It was incredible, you know. It was a beautiful story. And I remember leaving the house, and I went and sat in the car, and I had a good cry. I think of all things, working at hospice has taught me the importance of loving with intention, loving unconditionally, and loving excessively. I mean, that is what's important. Too often in life we focus on the material, and I even, you know, reflecting on my own marriage, I think I could have loved my husband with more intention and unconditionally. So that's what you learn. You know, grief is a really hard lesson, but what it does teach you is to value your relationships, to pay attention to them, and to love with intention.
Something you said really caught my attention. Well, actually everything you've said has caught my attention. But people have, all of us have profound things within us. Many years ago I sat next to a friend as he was dying, and he said, I need you to be my confessor. And I said, well, that's very heavy. I said, I don't know if I'm the right person. He says, I want you to listen. And I listened, and he told me things that he'd never said to anybody, not even his wife. Mm-hmm. Things he'd been ashamed of, mm-hmm. Guilt that he'd been carrying. And it wasn't really anything bad. Mm-hmm. It was just little things that he regretted, things he should have done. Mm. And the minute he finished, he said, my God, I feel like the weight of the world's lifted off me. and then he died.
Yeah. That's incredible.
But, you know, we all have insights and profound moments, and we seldom share those things with other people.
That's why being a counsellor is just such a privilege, because you do interact with other people, and there are times when people disclose things that they're stuck with for many, many years, that they feel ashamed about, they're unhappy about. So yes, I feel very privileged to have been with hospice all this time. It's not a job, it's a privilege. It's a real privilege.
How did you know you wanted to be a counsellor? Was it something that was, when you were a teenager, was it something that you were drawn to?
Well, actually, my mother used to read tea leaves. So when I was young, we always had people who used to come home, and my mother used to have these tea parties, and then she would read people's tea leaves. And my mum was also the person who was in charge of taking care of the family graves. So every weekend, she used to pack a basket, and we used to go to the cemetery. And while we ran around the cemetery, my mum would take care of the family graves, and she would allow us each to take turns to select a person that we were going to have lunch with. So we'd run around and look for a gravestone that we liked, and we would say, Mum, we would be going to have lunch with Charlie or Jill or whoever the person was. So I think death and dying, my mum always taught us never to be afraid of dying. And I think it stemmed from that, just watching her and her ability to engage with people made me want to be a little bit like her. And and so it was something I wanted to do. And once I got married, my husband was open to me going to varsity, because I didn't go to varsity until I was married. And here I am.
Your mother sounds like she was actually a natural born counsellor.
She was.
Tea leaves being the vehicle.
Yes, because my mother was uneducated. She only went to school for 3 years. She was the youngest of 9, and she was the only member of her siblings that was uneducated, and that was because her sister had died, and my mother was my gran. Following the death of her sister, my gran just didn't want my mother to leave home. She just became very anxious and stressed, and she homeschooled my mother, so my mother didn't have the opportunities that her brothers and sisters had, her other brothers and sisters.
So you mentioned when you were still in South Africa, you worked with HIV AIDS patients. What did that teach you?
Oh gosh, that taught me huge. I mean, that was the first time I was ever confronted with suffering. I mean, it was incredible, because the patients were all in the major symptomatic phase, which meant that their bodies were just packing up, and the smell was horrendous, I mean, there were days when you were seeing a patient, I often had to get up and just stand at the basin and just say, oh God, please don't let me faint, because the smell was overwhelming, and you were, trying to not show that you were overwhelmed and distressed. I remember the first day I came home, I got into the shower, and I was in the shower for about 2 hours trying to get the smell off me, and my husband said, you're going to have to get out the shower, and I just felt so overwhelmed. It was, the suffering was huge. Some of the mouths would foam. Some of the patients had maggots on them. And just the seeping sores, it was like stepping into a movie. It was almost unreal. I mean, I'd never been exposed to that kind of suffering and that level of suffering. It was an incredible experience.
Did you feel you were making a difference?
Oh, yes.
Then you moved to New Zealand?
Yes.
And a different kind of death?
Yes, different. And I mean, when I arrived, I'd actually come on a holiday, and then Clive told me about this position at hospice, and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to go, I'm going to apply. And I remember when I got the job, I didn't really have any work clothes, and obviously I'd have to work before I could afford to buy. And I remember having a conversation with the then CEO, Elizabeth Bang, and I said, I was just a little, when she congratulated me and said, oh, you've got the position. And I said, oh, well, I'm a little bit concerned because I really don't have clothes which are, I've got trousers, but I don't really have tops that are suitable for work. And she said, oh, that's not a problem. And she reached and went to the cupboard, and she took out two. At that time, the nurses were wearing a hospice top, but it was only the nurses that were allowed to wear those tops. And she took the two tops out the cupboard, and she said, you can wear those tops. And I said, oh, but they're for the nurses only. And she said, if anybody gives you any trouble, you tell them to come and see me. So I've never forgotten her generosity. She just reached out and said, you take those two and you wear them, and when you get paid, then you can buy something. So that was the first kindness that was shown to me. Mm-hmm.
Before we started recording the interview, you said New Zealand was wasn't what you expected.
Yep.
And were the people you were dealing with, were they different to what you were used to?
Yes.
And we should iterate that when you said that New Zealand was not what you expected, we don't mean that in a bad way.
No. Well, I just assumed that, because you speak English, that there's no difference, that I wasn't really expecting there to be such a big cultural difference, and there is a huge difference. I think South Africans are far more direct. New Zealanders tend to go more around and around and around, and never say what they mean and never mean what they say, Oh God, you're recording this. Yeah. So it was just a cultural shock. There was a huge difference. Yeah.
So when you start counselling patients, mm-hmm. Did you have to have a different approach to what you were used to?
Well, you have interesting experiences. For example, I went to visit a client, so I had talked to her, and she wasn't Kiwi, she was actually Dutch. So she was aware that I was South African, because you can tell on my accent, as he managed to. And so I drove all the way to her home, and the first thing she told me was that she didn't really like South Africans. So that was interesting on how you use your counselling skills there. So just giving her the space to offload and talk about the reason why she didn't like South Africans. So that was an interesting. So you do have interesting sessions because we are different. But I think as counsellors, you're trained to be a listener, and we don't give advice. You know, you try to leave your own opinions and ideas at the door and just be open to where the person is at.
You see a lot.
Yes.
You deal with a lot of people who are at the end of their lives.
Yeah.
Does it weigh on you?
Oh yes, you know, that's the first thing my mother told me. You know, when I majored in psych and criminology, and my mum said to me when she knew that I was going to go and do counselling, there's this Zulu proverb that says, "You can't wipe the tears of another man's face without getting your hands wet." And I said, "Well, Mum," and she said, "You know, every person that you interact with is going to have a profound effect on you." And I really didn't understand at that time, but I do understand now, how people can burn out and struggle with compassion fatigue, because it does weigh on you. It's impossible to be present in the suffering of others, or to be present when someone is dying and not to be affected by it. It just changes who you are as a person, you know. I think I'm a better person for it, but it does come at a cost.
When my father was dying in October, under hospice care, but at home, we were offered counselling as a family.
Yeah.
And we didn't take it.
Okay.
And looking back, that was the wrong decision.
But why did you not take it?
And I don't think counselling was really in our lexicon.
Okay.
But you learn these things. When you enter into the process of dying, especially a longer death. You know, I mean, I've had people, my sister, and she died by accident. That kind of death is sudden, and you don't have time to prepare. A longer death, you do have time to prepare. There's lots of things in families. Families are complicated.
Yes, they are very complicated.
And things that aren't said. And looking back, I think if there had been a counsellor there, I think we would have all coped a lot better. But I say you don't know that till after the fact sometimes.
No, and the thing is, you know, I think it's so important to tell the patient that you do love them, and to say I'm sorry, and that you forgive them, and hope that they will forgive you for the things that you've done that you shouldn't have done. Because in any relationship, there are things that you do that you can't take back, and it's really, really important for the patient to know that you forgive them for any past hurts. And a lot of people, it's amazing how many people don't actually talk to the relatives about the dynamics that have been going on for many, many years. They just say nothing and allow the person to die And I mean, I'm guilty of it myself. If I think when my dad died, and I was 30 years old. I'm a lot older now, but then I was 30 years old, and I never really got on with my dad. And he was ill for a long, long time. He had emphysema, and I visited one day, and he said, "Oh, Charmaine, I want to have a conversation with you. I want to talk to you about dying." And I said, "Look, Dad, I'm not." And I mean, I'd finished my psychology degree, so I should have known better, but I lacked the courage. And I said, "Dad, I'll tell you what, I'll come back tomorrow, but I just can't deal with it today." Because every interaction I had with my dad, we generally ended up in an argument. But the next day when I did return, he was no longer communicating. And so I'd missed that opportunity, and so that's something that has sat with me, that I wasn't brave enough to talk to my dad about the difficulty. And my mum always said that I was a lot like, she used to say, "You're just like your dad." And I was stubborn, I was arrogant, and I just, we were a lot alike, and I think that's why we didn't get on. Whereas my mother was soft, and my mother was gentle, and she was easy to talk to. She never judged. She'd always give you the second chance. Whereas my dad was less forgiving, and a lot more strict. His parenting style was very strict.
So even with all your skills and the years that have passed, you're still carrying a little bit of a burden.
Oh, well, you still regret it, and I often share it, because the hope is that if I share that bit of the history of my own with someone, that they won't make the same mistake as I have. Because once a person dies, you can't fix it. You've got to live with it. And so the only way you can process it is really to share your story. And often I meet clients who are holding grudges and are angry and frustrated. And you think, really, you just don't hold on to it, rather try to find a middle ground.
But it can be so hard.
Of course it's hard.
And if you get somebody over the hump, how do they feel afterwards?
Well, I think it's like the guy that I told you about, who said I look like his mum. Once he'd opened up about the pain that he felt, because there were 5 children in that family, and he couldn't understand why he was the one that was selected to be farmed out. So his entire life he felt there must be something wrong with me. So I think once you've shared that story, a burden shared is a burden halved. And so I do encourage clients to be, especially when a person, is dying, is to not only share the hard stuff, but to share how much you love the person. Because I think very often we don't tell each other often enough how important we are. I certainly didn't tell my husband often enough how much I appreciated him and how much he meant to me. My husband was an incredible person. You know, he had his Springbok colours in paddle surfing. He had his Natal colours in paragliding. He was a very extraordinary man. And I'm a really simple person, you know. He was very patient with me. Yeah, and that's why I say the importance of loving with intention and loving unconditionally. Yeah.
Were you able to express these things to him before he died?
Oh, yes, yes.
And how did that feel?
Oh, really good. It was really, really good. You know, often during the course of my marriage, often when we'd have an argument, my husband would say, do not come to me with that psychobabble. I can tell when you started, you know, he could tell when I was putting on the counsellor hat.
Yeah.
And he'd say, do not do that with me. Do not do that with me. But, you know, during the illness journey, the last 2 years of his life, I really made a huge effort to be present and in the moment. My regret is that I didn't do that all the time, you know. You know, if you reflect on your marriage, I suppose it's just like, I mean, I've got two sons. It's like you look at your parenting skills and you think, oh my goodness, I could have done a lot better, you know.
How did Pete react to the news that he was dying?
Oh, he wasn't afraid of death at all. You know, my husband, I mean, he was incredible. He had polio as a child, but that didn't affect him at all. As I said, he had his Springbok colours in paddle surfing and in paragliding. Because he couldn't run, they used to just throw him off. He was incredible. He was fearless. When he was diagnosed, he wasn't distressed or it was more me. I was going, oh my God, you know, because you know, working for hospice exactly. Well, you don't know exactly, but you know that there's no way you're going to come out of it. You know, I knew he wasn't going to come out of it alive. But he, when we went to see the oncologist, Dr. Archner, she said, well, do you want to know, you know, how long you've got? And he said, yes. And she said, well, if you have chemo, it'll probably be 2 years. If you don't, it will be shorter. And he said, okay, well, I'll try the chemo. And he did. He was very brave. He did try it for a while, but it was just really, the quality of life was no good, and he stopped. You know, my husband, yeah, you know, he was all about quality of life, not quantity. And he said, no, I'm not going to have any more chemo. It might shorten the time a little bit, but I prefer to have quality of life. And I mean, his wish was to go with the boys on a bike trip, because my husband had a BMW with a sidecar, and he wanted to go to Fleur's because he loved her cooking. He loved fish and he loved cooking. My husband was an excellent cook. He hated my cooking. Yes, he went to cooking school. In fact, he said, "Oh my God, my wife's cooking is so terrible."
Excuse me.
So he went to cooking school and he took the boys with him. So both my sons are excellent cooks, and their wives are very happy. They don't have to cook. Yeah. So my husband loved the kitchen. He loved trying Jamie Oliver and exploring. And so Clive took off work and Kevin took off work, and off they went on their motorbikes, and they went down to the South Island. So yeah.
And he found his peace.
Yeah, and he was quite happy. He'd done that and came back home and then sold his bike because he realised, you know, he wasn't going to be able to use it much longer. Yeah, he was quite happy. Yeah.
And then you had to learn something new about grief.
Oh God, yes. Oh God. Yeah, that's when you learn that you can know as much theory as you like, but it's until you're rowing in that boat that you have no clue. You have no clue. It was just so hard. I mean, I visited after Pete died. Kevin, my younger son, immigrated to the UK. And invited me to go, and he said, "Mum, just book the ticket, don't worry about it." And I said, "Oh, I don't know if I can, because my husband, I just followed my husband like a sheep wherever he went, and so the thought of having to travel to the UK on my own was just like overwhelming. You know, it's all those firsts that you have to do on your own. So although I am a professional, I think I'm pretty confident. I was just petrified of having to go. But I found that having done that trip, when I got back to New Zealand, I just felt that I was such a rush. I had such a high when I got back because I'd actually achieved it on my own. I'd actually managed to do that trip on my own. It was incredible. Yeah. But I mean, you know, that's the thing of being married, is that you divide the roles and you never really appreciate what the other person does. You just take it for granted. And it's when they died that you realize there's a lot of things that they did do that you didn't have to bother about, that now you've got to bother about.
Did you undertake grief counselling yourself?
No. No, I don't. I don't think I needed it, because working in an allied health team, there's counsellors, so we just talk generally. So I've got supervision, so all counsellors are required to do supervision, and that's a requirement because you have to be competent to practice. But Lucia, one of my lovely counselling friends who's retired now, I mean, if you felt you needed to have a chat, you just have a chat with the counsellors. You didn't, you know, it was general conversation. And I think being a counsellor, you just kind of talk about what's on top for you, you know.
One of the people I interviewed, she spoke about being offered grief counselling after her husband died, and she went to it somewhat reluctantly, and then later realised that it was absolutely magnificent. It really made all the difference. Really helped her to understand what she was feeling. So your role is very important.
Oh yes, I do. I feel very privileged. I feel very humbled by the position that I'm in. You know, the ability to sit with someone, and I hope that my own experience with grief and loss has made me a better counsellor and a better person and a better colleague. And I hope, that's all we can do is hope to be a better person.
Well, before we finish, Charmaine, it's a big question. So, you've probably already answered this because it's been a wonderful interview, very insightful. But what would be, in a very succinct way, what would you say to people about death, about the process of death?
I would say don't be afraid of death. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm certainly not afraid of dying. I think it has to do with the way it's the circle of life.
I sat down with my family, my partner and my kids, and I said, right, I'm going to do what I was meaning to do. And they said, what's that? I said, go and volunteer for hospice. And my partner goes, I would like to do that too, because we all experienced it. Well, her and I did, because our kids were too young. And they said, right, let's go up and come up here to Waikato Hospice and meet the voluntary manager and organise an appointment, and we'll come up and see her. We all went, the kids says, yeah, we want to come too, so we all came up, 4 of us, and sat down and talked with Karen, and I told her the story that my sister had passed, and she goes, yeah, look, we haven't got anything at the moment, but there is an opening drinks trolley on a Friday, because no one will do a Friday night. I said, look, I'll do it. And there was family services as well, so my partner said, I can do that too. So family services, you go in and sit with a patient while the husband or the wife can have 2 hours free time on their own, go and do shopping or go and get their hair done. So she did that, and I was quite interested in that too. So I said, look, let's both do it. So we did, and I enjoyed both of them. And we still worked, and the kids were quite interested, so they would go down into the shop and just see if they could help any little thing. So we did that. I did that for a year, and then I thought, and my partner said to me, oh, look, you really enjoy family services, because she enjoyed it, and she works for IRD, so she got really busy. Would you like to carry on while I'll do some part-time, but she was getting busy. So would you like to do it? So I went and asked Karen. And Karen goes, oh yeah, there is an opening there. Well, I still did the drinks trolley because it was only one night a week. And I enjoyed that because, you sit there and talk to people.
Now the drinks trolley is a trolley that's got pretty much everything. Yes. Soft drink to the hardest alcohol.
Hardest alcohol, chips and everything, like little packets of chips. But see, when I went on there, I don't use the trolley. I just go in there and talk to them. Who would like what, and if there was a big family in there, you come with me. So, and they would come out and they would do their own, and then we'd go back in. And what surprised me is that a lot of patients would say, oh, I'm not allowed to drink. I said, yes, you are, because I would go to the nurse station first and say, who do I don't go? What room do I don't go into? Are they all allowed alcohol? Is it okay? And they would say, yep. So, which surprised me when they said, no, I'm not allowed. I'm on this med. I said, look, I've just talked to the nurses. You're allowed a little bit of this and that. They went, oh, okay. So once they, as you do, being human, you have a little bit of alcohol in you, you start to talk. So, and that was it. And they were just, one guy talked to me about his life experience. And it was really, really cool how he did. He was about 80. And back in the day, like I was quite proud to be born in the 60s because there was a lot of good stories back then, and I could relate to that. So it was really nice listening to the life experience of these guys. This guy he was a sales rep for farmers. Is it Farmers Co-op? I can't remember the old company, sheep farmers. So, and I had an uncle who used to sheep farmers, and we used to chat away. he's had some so hilarious stories, and he had some good stories and some sad stories, but it's quite nice going back in that era. So he quite enjoyed the drinks trolley. Drinks trolley would only take you 30 minutes, but I was about an hour because we love to talk and love to meet people, and it just made the evening, because I'd time it where I'd go in before dinner. Dinner was at 6, so I'd be there at 5 and just do the rooms, just get them all warmed up before dinner, and it was. And if I got too busy and the dinner would come in, I'd help serve dinner too. So I was still there, so I'd help our cooks and the nurses just to help dish out.
So the drinks trolley brings us. It's part of this process of keeping things familiar, homely,
yep.
Warm,
very, very much
convivial.
Very much, yep. And a lot of the families don't know that. They go, "Oh, I didn't know you had a drinks trolley." And we would say, "Yeah, it's not just for the patients. You can have one as well." And, to a limit, but they're just blown away with. I didn't know you guys can do that. So, with the other part of my job is with the guys going out in the equipment. We also, because it's the guys that go out there, and I do sometimes, but they'll come back and they'll share with me their experiences. Like they didn't know, as you know, hospice is like not a death wish, but it's the end of the road when they say hospice, or you see the van come up, the neighbour go, "Oh no, that person's dying." But when they go in there, they also share, look, we are hospice, we provide a service. We've got counselling, we've got financial, we've got people that will come out, and they don't know that. So the guys experience that and they share that with them, because they go out and deliver equipment, but they also share hospice as a whole, as not a bad name, but a good name, because we're here to care for your families. We're here to help the family support. We've got nurses that come out here. So when families hear hospice, oh no, their heads drop. But when we go in there, especially our guys, they share a lot of, hey, we're not just here to, and they come out of there going, wow, these people didn't know that. Now they're happy. Well, they've got a bit of a skip in their step, because hospice is not too bad, And when I hear that from the guys coming back from their run, and they feel good, and I went, "Oh, look at what you've done. You're spreading, not the love, but you're spreading information that they don't know about." So it's really great. So now they have pamphlets in the vans where they'll hand them, "Well, who do we ring?" So here's a card, So they love that kind of bit too, because it's not just delivering gear; it's sharing what hospice is about. I'm on this earth to care for people, help people. Just be there for anyone that's sitting on their own. "Oh, what are you sitting there for? Come over here." It's just the kind of person I think I know who I am now. So hospice is just a dream job for me.
Tragic as it was, Susan's death was a positive thing for you as a person.
Yes, it was. Yeah. With seeing hospice and what they did, that was a big plus for me. It was this when I thought I need to do that. And when I talk to people, even my family, my brothers and sisters, they say to me, "That's you. It's always been you, and you're in the right place, you're in the right job." And, because it takes a special person to do what you do. And okay. So, quite proud of that.
Isn't that a wonderful thing when you're a certain age and you find new meaning for your life?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And that was it. It turned the corner for me. Sometimes when you sit there, what am I here for? But I know my calling is now. I know I should be here. And it is a dream job for me. I come in here every morning. I love the people, because, as you know, the people here got a purpose in what they're doing too. I talk to the counsellors. They're here to do what they need to do, and they don't do it because they have to. They do it because they want to, and they care about people. That's why I enjoy the company around here, because even my volunteers don't know them from when I first started. Didn't know who they were, but I could see what they were here for, And they volunteer their time, just like me in Drinks Trolley, because they enjoy what they do. They are here because they want to be here. You know, you can volunteer might ring up and say, look, I'm really sick today. I'm really sorry. You're sick, but I don't want to let you guys hospice down. You know what they mean. You think just like me. And, there's, as they say, special people that do that thing. We've got special people here. And, I enjoy coming here because we're here to do what we can for the community and people that are out there.